Bienvenido al podcast de The Way. Si quieres aprender inglés y hablar con confianza, estás en el sitio correcto. Hemos ayudado a miles de personas como tú a mejorar su inglés y alcanzar sus objetivos. Visita nuestra web theway.es para conocer más sobre nuestros cursos online desde A2 hasta C1 y descubre cómo podemos ayudarte a avanzar en tu aprendizaje. Además, si necesitas una certificación oficial, también ofrecemos la opción de realizar el examen Language Pair cómodamente desde casa.
Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, hello.
So, welcome to another The Way podcast with our new series, which is Real Life, Real English. And today we are joined with Connor, who I met on TikTok. So, Connor's got a lot of videos on pronunciation, which I absolutely love because we can teach our students in class the way that Connor does it. And he does it in quite a funny way as well. So, yeah, worth checking out. And this is going to be a really cool conversation. So, Conor, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
First off, tell us a little bit about yourself because that's not an accent like mine. So, where are you from? Tell us what we need to know.
Yeah, so no, you're right. Different accent. I'm from Ireland. I'm from the south of Ireland. I studied to be an engineer, and I worked for 2 years. I was a biomedical engineer, and now I live here in Naples, in Italy, where I teach English. Yeah.
Fantastic. And that's the big jump from engineering to teaching English. Why the big change?
No, good question. It is a mad jump. It is pretty a pretty big jump. I just realized it wasn't for me. And I realized that I wanted to change, and I got very lucky. When I did change, I really found a passion in teaching. I didn't realize how much I would like it, but instantly, everything about it. Sometimes I will leave work with more energy than when I arrived, and for me, that's more. That's worth more than money. That's it's very very valuable. So yeah, I love it.
So tell us a little bit about where you're from in Ireland specifically.
Hmm. Okay, right. So I'm not sure if many listeners will know much about Ireland, but near the south, down south, there is a city called Cork. And then maybe 2 hours to the west, there is a little town called Kilorglin. And that's where I grew up. So yeah, Kilorglin is a town of about 2,000 people, I think.
Oh wow,
Yeah, that's small. Quite different to Naples, to be fair.
completely. And I think when people think of Ireland and things like that, they probably imagine exactly where you're from, like a little village, 2,000 people. But obviously, there's so much more to Ireland than that as well. But it is so true that stereotypical. That's what they imagine. I suspect your students stay the same when they ask you about your hometown.
Sure, I love showing my students. I always get very excited and a bit homesick. I won't lie. Like we will we'll be in class and they'll say, "Oh, teacher, where are you from?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm from the south." They usually don't know the cities, and then I'll show them some pictures, and there's usually a few gasps. Wow, che bello!
Over. What you find with people that are passionate about learning English, they're also passionate about traveling. So when we have people on the show that are from places like Ireland, I always like to kind of give a bit of background information about it in case they do want to travel to that place. So you mentioned Cork, which is quite a famous city. Would that be the closest airport to you?
That'll be the closest airport. We have three airports. So you have Dublin, you have Shannon, which is maybe on the west coast near me also, and then you have Cork also. Yeah, so that would be the closest. Cork's very beautiful. I would recommend Galway. You want the Irish experience, you gotta go on the west coast. That's my personal recommendation. West coast is the wild Atlantic way we call it. Well, I think you need a Google search and you'll see. I think you'll be surprised. Yeah.
And obviously, Cork being one of the most famous places, but you mentioned Dublin as well. Uh, people going back to people going back to Ireland or want to travel there, what should they look out for on the West Coast?
On the west coast, well, you have so much. It's okay. So you have the cliffs of Moher. You have where I'm from. It's called the Ring of Kerry. So it's how should we say, a ring of towns. Extremely beautiful. Um, yeah, I mean Ireland, as we all know, its landscape is extremely beautiful. But also make sure to bring your rain jacket. That's for sure. Maybe I wouldn't even bring an umbrella because it's probably going to be windy also. Yeah. Well, what to expect? Yeah, I mean, look, you're gonna have very welcoming people, beautiful landscape, and overall a good time. I think. Yeah. One thing I would say, my recommendation is you might need to rent a car. The public transport isn't the best, just because it's so, how should we say, sparse. Kind of the towns are quite small, so the buses are not the easiest to use from city to another.
Intercity is quite good transport, but
Like, yeah, but maybe in between that, yeah, like for example, if you were traveling up the west coast, I would recommend a car.
yeah, definitely. And that's the best way to see your place when you are traveling, I think, as well, is to rent your own vehicle of sorts. Yeah. So from Ireland to Italy, how did that happen?
Oh yeah, okay. So mm, I applied for an internship with TEFL, TEFL Ireland, and the internship was for Italy in general,
Yeah.
and yeah, I applied for it. I gave them some preferences from cities in Italy, and then they said, "Well, what would you think about Naples?" And I kind of said, "Well, if that's where I'm meant to be, that was kind of my idea. I didn't want to change it, like." And honestly, I am so glad I came here. Naples is amazing. It's so full of culture. The weather is fantastic. Of course, coming from Ireland, I appreciate the sunshine just a little bit more. So yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's a city with a volcano on the sea. It's fantastic. The people are so welcoming, and also Italian. The language is beautiful. Not to mention the food. I haven't even mentioned the food, which is probably number one.
Yeah, definitely number one. So what did your family say when you told them that you were off to Italy?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't too surprising because I have been someone that's always talked about moving abroad. I have always, probably too much to my parents. I've always talked about specifically, well, initially it was France. My dream was to move to France, and there wasn't many opportunities, and I wasn't, as I say, I wasn't pushy. I wasn't set on anything. And when the opportunity for Italy arose, I just grabbed it and got on the plane. Yeah.
And how many years ago was that?
That was last year. So the January last year, I arrived over here. So it was just a year and a month now. Um,
Yeah.
time flies. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, good expression there. Time flies when you're having fun.
That's it. That's it. Time flies. You know what I love is that in English, sometimes well, a lot of the time we will chop off the second half. So it's almost like I don't need to say the rest of it for you. But yeah, of course, when we're teaching, of course, we have to say the rest of it, right? So yeah, time flies when you're having fun. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about what got you into creating videos on TikTok especially, but obviously you're on Instagram as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So with where I'm working at the moment, it's I have roughly about 25, 30 hours a week. So I have a bit of free time during the week. And I just thought, why don't I try and build an audience and help some people online? Um, and it's so cool. Like even this right now, this connection has come from TikTok and nothing else. You know what I mean? It's fantastic. It's really exciting. The world we live in now. You know how easy it is to connect with other people. It's
Yeah. Do you know what? It's one of those businesses that we're in where, let's say we had a cafe and my cafe was on the street and yours was just down the road. We would be competitors. Yeah, teaching is so open. We don't like to guard any secrets or anything like that. It's like we're all open to share our experiences, our knowledge, what works for us, etc. And that's what I absolutely love about this profession is just everyone's so welcoming and open to collaborate, which is so cool. And hopefully it's going to work well for this podcast because, everyone I've asked so far has been like, yeah, get me on.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, when you're in that kind of a space, especially online, there's so many people that there's no point in competing. to say. You know what I mean? It's like it's yeah, it can only make it better for you to it can only improve you to learn from other people and share secrets with other people, and not secrets, but share how shall we say, like a ways to improve things like that. Yeah. Yeah. So Evie, sorry, there's another TikToker that I was messaging, and he was giving me some advice and I was giving him some advice, and yeah, we were like,
It is really cool. So going back to your videos on TikTok, obviously they have a very specific style. You talk about pronunciation a lot, and you put the different words on the screens, then you pronounce them how they should be pronounced, and then you obviously break down that pronunciation for the viewer as well. Which over here in Spain, where we are, a lot of the English teachers. I'm going back 5 or 6 years now. A lot of the English teachers in the schools, nearly all of them, were Spanish, and they had a very Spanish accent. So the students were coming into our academy, and they had learned the word through a Spanish English speaker. And we had to go and correct them with the pronunciation. Now that the level of English here in Spain is so much higher, it doesn't happen as much, but it still does happen. So like table, they still come in and say tablet. So how did you find that style of video? And what made you kind of push pronunciation videos?
well, it's a great question, and it's something that has been with me since I started. Basically, uh, when I got to Italy, I had no Italian, and then I started learning some Italian, and I started realizing why the students were making the mistakes that they do. And one common thing I noticed was that they were reading the words as they saw them, because that's what you do in Italian. It's phonetic language, so it's very easy to read. English, unfortunately, is just not the same. Uh, I guess because of a lot of historical changes with the languages and a lot of influences from other languages, the pronunciation is quite difficult. And I think, in my opinion at least, pronunciation is one of the most difficult things about English. Um, we have, I, for me, every language has something. It has something that's difficult. Now, from my experience with Italian, it's the grammar. The grammar is extremely difficult. But the English pronunciation is, for me, number one. It's you will always have students with issues with pronunciation. So I think, yeah, giving them more help with the pronunciation, that's really where it came from. Yeah.
Where it came from. And obviously, did you find that style yourselves from teaching it in a classroom?
Yeah. I think my videos are a small bit different, but I think one thing that really helps when you're teaching pronunciation is you might board words that are similar. Um, I'm trying to think now. Like, okay, so for example, the GH in tough, right? That's a killer. It's, it's pronounced like an S. Like, come on, what are we doing? You're not me. So I would board tough, rough, enough. And then just to make sure that they don't get too comfortable with the OU, I might say cough. So I really would just make sure I board a lot of examples. And then this way you can kind of, how shall we say, like slowly bring them into it, as opposed to just one word and pronounce it like this. You kind of have a gradient of, if that makes sense. I don't know. But you have like a lot of words that would eventually lead you to.
Yeah, and it's very visual as well. So you can see the different words on the screen as well. But going back to rough and tough, and that obviously the GH sometimes has the F sound, but then we can just throw all of those into it, where it's not pronounced at all. We just leave it off. It's just a silent.
Sometimes I say to my students, like, I'm sorry. I didn't make this language. I promise. It's not my fault.
Yeah. And in actually, this is a good segue onto the topic that you want to talk about. So, as you know, on this show, we like to talk about a topic that's passionate to our guests, and we call it real life, real English. Now, Connor wants to talk about the different personalities that we have in different languages, because he's obviously learning Italian at the moment, and speaks English. And there's certain things that you can explain better in one language than the other, which when we're talking in the classroom, or I know I am in my classrooms, when they say, why is it this? So why is tough pronounced sound, and why is although not pronounced? at the end, I say porque sí. Just it, but I don't think there's a translation of porque sí into English like that. We just say yeah, just because.
Yeah. Because it is.
It is what it is, I suppose. Yeah, because it is. But it's so much easier for me to just go porque sí, because that's what they use a lot here in Spanish. So tell us a little bit about the different personalities that you're finding by learning Italian.
Yeah. Okay. So, definitely, it's definitely something that has always been on my mind because I also actually learned a bit of French when I was younger. I'd say I maybe reached a B1 level, if I'm being honest. So now not so much, but Italian definitely. Um, Sometimes, the students will say an Italian word, and they will say like, how do we say that in English? And one of the ones that they always say is magari. So magari is like it's like maybe, but then it's also like hopefully. And I'm like, guys, there's no translation. Like, it just is what it is. So I guess, sorry, to go back to, again, small bit sidetrack, but to go back to your question, I think because we have different ways of expressing ourselves in different languages, because that's the way it is, right? Different languages have different ways of expressing ourselves. So I think we express a different part of our personality when we learn a different language. So for me, like saying like, uh, I guess expressing maybe if I was annoyed or I wasn't happy with something is a lot easier in Italian than it would be in English, which is crazy when you think about it because English is my first language, like wild.
Do you think that's to do with the body language? So deep, but
Yeah, it's so expressive. It's beautiful. I love it. I love it. So then I get really excited when I learn a new language because I feel like going back to your point about how people who love other languages also like to travel. I think they're also quite open minded, and I think that's because you learn to think in another way almost. You learn a new language, you learn to express yourself a bit differently, and I think that comes with also thinking in another way, which is, for me, it's really fascinating and something I think I would like to study in the future. Really, really cool. But to go back to what sorry, I'm jumbling this all up, but to go back to Magari is like, so you might say, oh, it's not raining tomorrow. I would say magari, which means like maybe, but they have another word for maybe. And then you might say hopefully, but they have another word for hopefully. I'm like, there's no translation. So whenever I get to say that to them, I'm like, yeah.
it's it is a really cool sensation. I was not very good at languages at school, and by immersing myself, I'm definitely an immersive learner. So when I came here and immersed myself, I was then able to learn the language. But I'm just going to go back to two things that you said. Which first thing was it's been on my mind for a long time. So to be on the mind, it means like I've been thinking about it for a long time. But it's a really cool expression, and we would use it more than I've been thinking about this certain topic for a very long time. Is that's been on my mind?
Yeah, no, that's something whenever I'm teaching students level B2 or C1, I always say, guys, look, now you're learning phrasal verbs. Now you're learning idioms. I say, because we use those. That's fluency. You know what I mean? So, I think being around English as much as you can, you're gonna become more accustomed to those. You're gonna hear them more often. And most importantly than anything, this I tell my students all the time, you have to be reading English, watching English, because you can learn the vocabulary from your copy, but until you see it in context, you're not going to fully understand it and you won't be able to use it as well as you would if you're watching Peppa Pig. You know what I mean? Funny example, but it's a great way to learn. See it is key on the context. Have to see that. And
Yeah. Something else you said, where was I'm getting jumbled up. Jumbled. I don't think I've heard the word jumbled up for a long, long time. How could you explain that in basic English?
not a good question. Yeah. Jumble, I guess mixed up, jumble up. I want to give you an example. I had a handful of crayons and I jumbled them up. I mixed them up. Maybe an example, right?
Wonder, is that even in the dictionary? That's a good one. Junk.
Yeah, no, something in the classroom. Just for teachers that might be listening is, I remember at the beginning I was so scared to make mistakes, and then after a while I started to realize, well, that's actually part of language. Like, you're going to make mistakes, and even though I'm a fluent speaker, I also make mistakes. And being comfortable in the classroom making mistakes, it also lets the students know that there's not so much pressure. Like, okay, the fluent speaker who's been speaking for 25 years, he made a mistake, a very basic mistake sometimes. Okay, cool, I can relax. And if you're stressed, you're not going to learn anything. So you need to be relaxed, and getting your students relaxed by making a mistake sometimes is actually the best thing you can do, as opposed to the work you would think, you know.
Yeah, 100. I can't agree with you anymore with like mistakes. Like, I am a person that makes a million mistakes, not just speaking, but in general life. But it's how we learn, and it's how we get better as people. Is how you don't repeat the same mistake, and how you definitely grow, like in business, the amount of mistakes I've made in business. But you need to make 10, 15 mistakes before one thing is correct, you know? So it's a part of the learning journey, I think.
One thing for me, I've actually learned better. So like sometimes when I'm speaking Italian and I don't make the mistake, or I'm afraid to make the mistake, I won't, I won't really remember it next time. But if I embarrass myself and I make a terrible mistake, I will never forget it. E- So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm not forgetting that rule again. You know, we should be making mistakes. Like, you actually kind of have to in a way.
Things- has there been any embarrassing mistakes in Italian? Like, we've got a few here. One of our teachers, she was at the gym with myself. This is going back some years. Um, and she did something wrong and wanted to say in Spanish that she was embarrassed. So she said something like "estoy embarazado" because it sounded like embarrassed, but what it actually means is I'm pregnant. She wanted to say that she was embarrassed because she did something wrong, but she actually said she was pregnant. And then for the rest of the class, the coaches were looking at her like, "Hetty Deezy, put down those weights. You need to." And then they explained, like, "No, no, you said you were pregnant." So that's always a story I remember when people say they make mistakes with language. Is there any mistake like that that you could share?
oh my goodness, I'm trying to think. Um, okay, so there's, I don't know if it's very suitable. I'll keep it PG. There's a verb in Italian that means to discover or find out something. And it's very similar to, how shall we say, be intimate with somebody. We'll say it like this, right? So I was trying to say, oh, I discovered or I found out from my friend about this. And obviously that's not what I had said. And I got some very strange looks from the people I was speaking to.
You said intimate with, like, what do you? Yeah, it's such a journey, isn't it, when you're learning a second language? Yeah. So this is an interesting question, purely because it's something that's been on my mind for a while. So when you're learning Italian, and you're walking down the street, and we've all got that internal dialogue in our heads. Has that switched to Italian yet?
Oh, wow, good question. You know what? No, not fully. Not fully. There are times when I will, because my girlfriend is also Italian, so I will be speaking to her in Italian. But I'll tell you, one of the coolest things that has happened to me, and it's kind of like I've been very present in the moment, is I'll be speaking to my girlfriend and we'll be having a full conversation. And then I'll kind of stop thinking about the conversation. I think, wow, like I'm having a full conversation in Italian here. You know what I mean? Like, and I'll be really like excited and I'm like, wow, I'm learning. It could be that kind of a, yeah, that kind of idea. But no, I have my internal dialogue isn't Italian, no, not yet. Not, but what way hopper? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. One thing I read about, it hasn't happened to me. It happened to me in French, but not in Italian. Is when you dream in another language, apparently it's a sign that you are close to fluency. Which is That's exciting. I would like to have a dream with Italian.
So this internal conversation, I was driving to work one day. I was going a little bit too fast, and behind me, I saw a police car, and I'm like, "Oh, no." And this whole thing was going on in my head where I'm like, "He's gonna pull me over. What am I gonna say? All right, I'm gonna come up with an excuse, da, da, da." And I had this whole conversation with myself in Spanish because I was thinking about what I was gonna say to the police officer in Spanish. And anyway, I just pulled into the inside lane, and this police car just went flying past. That's okay. But then I realized that I'd had this full-on conversation with myself. My internal self was talking to itself in Spanish about this hypothetical situation that didn't even occur in the end. And then at that moment, I was like, "Wow, you know what? I think my Spanish is starting to get to that level where you could call it fluent." And another thing I was thinking about when you're learning a second language is you said about dreaming. Um, Dreaming in the second language is really cool. But then there's certain things that you learn in the second language that you hadn't learned in the first language. So for me, I went to a restaurant and there was I'm trying to think of it in English. Oh yeah, right. There was aubergine on the menu, and I translated it. It said aubergine. I'm like, what the hell is aubergine? I'd never ever seen an aubergine in the UK before. So I learned the Spanish of aubergine, which is berenjena, uh, and I didn't know what it was in English. And then we've been refurbishing a house here, and I haven't done building work in the UK, so I haven't had to order certain materials. And there's things that I just know that it is what it is in Spanish, and I have no idea what it is in English.
Fantastic, isn't it? That's amazing. I wonder, like, how, because I know there's been a lot of studies on learning different languages and how that affects your brain and how it affects your aging and how it's so healthy for you. And yeah, I can't imagine. Like, for me, the only now I can't say there I have many examples of that, but I would have some examples of things like panettone, like the dessert. Right. So for me, people are like, "What do you eat in Naples?" Like if somebody asks, "Well, oh, panettone," they're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Ah, it's like a cake." Like, I don't know. Well, it's easy. Well, one thing for me is like, because I think also this would be great for some students listening, is you will go through waves of being good at the language, and maybe there'll be some days when you're just not with it. Not with him, a nice phrase, but yeah, when you're not really, maybe you're tired, right? You're not so good that day. I think it's not really understood, or at least not appreciated, that we can have off days in a language. You know what I mean? You can have an off day in a sport, but when people think of a language, like, no, it doesn't make sense. But it does. It's perfectly normal. And sometimes some students will ask me, how do you say this in English? They'll tell me a word in Italian, and I won't know what to say because I'm like, I know exactly what you're saying, but my brain right now is just fried from the mixture. I can't think of the English word, which for me, it seems unfathomable, really. It's legit. No, I think it's not.
Yeah, our brain's another muscle, and we need to train that muscle. And like, there's times where I've been in corporate meetings and things for 3, 4, 5 hours, and it's all been in Spanish. And I leave, and I am absolutely shattered after the meeting. And actually, as I was saying that, it's a really cool tip and you probably do it because you specialize on your pronunciation. So when I said absolutely shattered, the stress on the absolutely and then the stress of shattered, breaking down every single syllable makes it sound so much more dramatic. Where I could just, yeah, I was absolutely shattered. Oh, about you, good. Yeah. So as I was saying it, I thought that's going to be quite cool to break down for the audience. Uh, Absolutely shattered. Like, don't be scared to use your voice as like the tool that it is to get across some information, especially if you don't have all of the vocabulary, because you can communicate so much with emotion and tone of voice with a limited amount of vocabulary.
Sure, for sure. I always tell my students, like, don't worry about getting it perfect. If I can understand the message, that's the, like, why do we have language? You know what I mean? We have language to communicate. Okay, did you communicate what you wanted to? Okay, cool. Like, don't worry. You know, it's that's what language is for. The problem is we come from schools, from primary schools and secondary schools where it's taught for a test, which can be difficult. Can be difficult to learn that way, and it doesn't translate a lot of the time, I find.
Yeah, it's really true. And a lot of the standard exams, like Cambridge, for example, a lot of the standard exams, your English has to be perfect, or else it's either it's correct or it's incorrect. And we actually work with an exam board called Language Search, and their exams are so much more user friendly because part of the speaking exam is you're actually having a dialogue with another person. So it's like a role play. Uh, and they set the scene. They will say, right, you're trying to book a room in a hotel and you want these things. You start. So the candidate actually has to start the conversation, and they get graded on how much they've actually understood the situation, how much they can communicate what they want, and then how they respond to what the examiner says afterwards. It's like, okay, would you like this, or this? And then they respond again. And it's so much better for the learners that struggle with your standard exact, where it's either correct or incorrect, and everything has to be perfect. It's a really, really cool exam. Eh?
Oh, I love that. I love that because like accuracy is just one part of the language. It's not everything. And when it's treated as everything, it becomes a maths exam. It becomes a science. Language isn't maths. And that's why I always say that it's not maths. It's not science. There's not always a very obvious answer. So yeah, you can't treat it like that. And when you do, there's a bit of a misalignment. Yeah. Right. That's fantastic.
Going back to um, how you communicate in Italian compared to English. Have you found anything else apart from the hopefully and the maybe thing? Is there any other things that it's easier for you to express yourself in Italian than?
I'm trying to think. Um, so there's something they say dai, which means like come on,
Uh-huh.
but it's used a bit more broadly. So like I wouldn't say come on very often in English, but I say die on a daily basis. You know what I mean? So I die like let's go, like come on, and I hurry up. You know, it just falls into all those categories that you can't really translate. I mean, the actual translation, if I'm not wrong, is you give. So
See that. So it's not yet to be translated. Yeah.
No, but they use it for that. So in Spanish we would have vamos, like vamos.
let's start. Vamos is like andiamo, like let's go.
Yeah.
Andiamo will be used like let's go, like specifically let's go. What the football game, right? You say let's go, okay, use like that. But die is like, come on, come on.
Hurry up, etc. So there's a really interesting thing here in Spanish, which is ganas, and they say that they have ganas. So they say tengo ganas, and basically what it means is that I have so much excitement for something that's happening in the future. Whereas we would say there's a phrase verb for us is looking forward to, but me it could be like I'm really looking forward to the race that I have next weekend. But it's like tengo ganas for the race that I have just has so much passion to it. So I use tengo ganas so much more than I'm looking forward to something. So that's another completely different personality thing, and it does. It just has so much more passion when you say it, like tengo ganas, because it's like have that I'm looking forward to. It's like I'm doing this thing I'm looking forward to, or I have this emotion. So it's an already cool.
Yeah, because you would say like I'm excited, but that's not gonna doesn't cover it, does it? It's not enough.
No, no, and there it wouldn't cut it. It's called expression, isn't it? How would you explain it? Wouldn't cut it.
So whenever I get asked how do you explain it, I always think where does it come from? It wouldn't cut it. So I would use it wouldn't cut it. Maybe if you were thinking, excuse me, if you were thinking about somebody making a football team or a basketball team, he didn't make the cut. So I guess the cut off point, is that what we're talking about? If you want to, you're not within the range, kind of, so to speak. So you wouldn't cut it. It doesn't make the cut off. Cut off. Yes.
Yeah, very true. It wouldn't be selected.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
I mean, I do love. We could talk for hours about. That's why I think that this real life, real English, just two people that have a passion about the English language or language in general, just getting together and having a chat and breaking down little things. There's so much in these podcasts for the listener. And if you are listening, I would 100% recommend that you log on to YouTube and watch it as well, because you can understand so much more when you see what's going on. One of the podcasts we did with Teacher Jack, we were talking about passive and active learning and how you can watch a film and it's very passive, you know, whereas active learning, you need to sit down and concentrate. And I think if you've got audio, you really have to concentrate. You have to listen for everything. But whereas if you've got the video and the audio, it becomes so much more easier to understand the context of the conversation. You might get a bit lost and then you see me or Connor do something and it's like, I know where we are now. Right. They're talking about this. And then you can get to the point and follow the conversation again. So I like to try and keep these conversations to about 30 minutes, and we're at 36 already. That's how cool this conversation's been. So what we'll do, we'll move on, right? We're going to go into in the spotlight where I'm just going to push your socials. So your Instagram is on the screen now, Connor's English Corner. Do you share different content on different platforms or?
I usually have the same content on each platform, but I will start to change it a small bit. Because I think, yeah, people like different videos on different platforms for sure.
Yeah.
Also, something I forgot to mention was I have a YouTube also. I have shorts on YouTube, and I will start doing grammar breakdowns on that. So to answer your question, yeah, I'll have grammar breakdowns on YouTube, and maybe no, I won't do grammar breakdowns on TikTok or Instagram, but more.
Okay. And your YouTube, is it the same as your other socials? Cool. So check out Connor on Instagram, which is Connor's English Corner, all one word. On TikTok, the exact same, Connor's English Corner, and on YouTube. You don't have a website yet, but you were telling me you're in the process of setting up an Etsy shop.
Correct. Yeah. So that will be linked to my TikTok and my Instagram and also my YouTube. So yeah.
Perfect. And all of these links I will leave in the show notes as well, so that the viewers can go and check out your videos. And I would highly recommend that everyone goes and subscribes on any of the platforms and watches Connor's videos because they are unique. There are so many English teachers on these social platforms, and we're all trying to compete for the same viewership. But Connor has definitely created something unique that I haven't seen before, and I will be copying. I mean, you learn a lot as a teacher by watching his videos. So as a student, you will learn a lot more as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
And the last thing that I always ask our guests to do before we end the show is to pass the mic to another teacher, another TikToker, or someone that you think we could invite onto the show to keep the kind of the network effect going.
You know what? Yeah, I was thinking about this and I wasn't sure. There is a guy I work with, and I haven't even told him about this. So let's see. Maybe you could send him on an email. I can let you know his email. Walter is his name. Walter. He knows his stuff. He knows his.
He's from the UK.
He is from Honduras, actually. Interestingly. Yeah, Walter's a cool guy. Yeah.
And does he do some stuff on social media as well? Or
I think he's starting to. Yeah. I think he's starting to now. So yeah. But yeah, so me. I'll send him on the email for sure.
that'd be really cool. Yeah, send me his socials and then we can tag him in the show notes as well. So Connor, thank you so much for coming on and spending this Saturday afternoon with me. It's been difficult for us to find a time that suits the both of us. So the Saturday afternoon, I'm on
His leave. Yeah. But no, I'm glad. This was great fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No problem. And like I said, all of the details are going to be in the show notes. So make sure to go check Conor out. And hopefully we'll collab on something else in the near future. Maybe you'll see us in videos together, or we'll do another podcast together.
Nice. Yeah, I would love to. Who knows? Who
Of
knows?
course.
Definitely. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Thank you, Conor.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Si disfrutaste de este episodio y quieres llevar tu inglés al siguiente nivel, te invitamos a descubrir vuestros cursos online en thewen.es, diseñados para mejorar tu fluidez y confianza en situaciones reales. Hemos ayudado a miles de personas como tú a transformar su aprendizaje. Visita ahora thewen.es y realiza nuestro test de nivel interactivo de manera gratuita. Además, si necesitas una certificación oficial, también ofrecemos la opción de realizar el examen de midterm como la ven desde casa.